Shut up, I want to talk to you guys about Snow White. This video is probably going to be the closest I've ever come to doing a proper film review. That's not normally what I strive to do. Thousands of people already do movie reviews, many much better than I ever could. What I strive to do is focus on specific takes, ideas, themes presented in movies, intentional or not, and dissect them in an effort to once again experience the dopamine rush I got when I got a 97 in English class. I'd get the same high when Ms. Bird would return my paper with a good job sticker as I do now when Jizuya comments, "This video feeds my autism so good." Today I come to you with my hottest take of all, and it's not that Pulp Fiction can make you a better person or that Timothée Chalamet gives off big sloth vibes. It's simply this. Snow White was okay. This is not normally a film that I would see in theaters. I'd watch it maybe a year later when I'm bored of an evening or when I'm babysitting my nephew, although probably not even then because Spider-Man's not in it. But people were so hyped to hate on this movie so far in advance that I felt like I couldn't trust reviews. And maybe it's that we're living in an age of unprecedented levels of misinformation, but I was like, this is one thing where I can go out and see it for myself and know. So I saw it for myself, and it was as I suspected. This is an average Disney live-action remake. Not nearly the best, not nearly the worst. So after my careful research, which includes watching the original, and also accidentally almost seeing Anora because I went into the wrong theater and for some reason didn't think it was strange that this many adults were gathered to watch Snow White at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, I'm going to go through all the common criticisms of this film and tell you whether I believe they are valid or not. Criticism 1, Spider-Man's not in it. This is valid. I mean, it's Disney. You own Spider-Man. He should be in everything. Criticism 2, we didn't need a Snow White remake in the first place. Now, I'd say I'm not a fan of remakes, but I think I'm really like everyone else, and I'm not a fan of how remakes are pumped out these days purely to capitalize on existing popular films and franchises that weren't close to requiring a new version, instead of bringing something new to a property that was maybe a classic, important film that could perhaps use some updating. And by that metric, Snow White is the only remake we need. I'd really like to know how many people who are complaining that this version ruined the original have actually watched the original lately. I keep seeing it described as a beautiful love story. Girl, where? You know what the prince doesn't have besides a name in the original? Any lines of dialogue with or without Snow White. He shows up, sings at her, and then they don't see each other for another hour of runtime. Then he shows up and kisses her unconscious body, and they still have no dialogue together as Snow White says goodbye to the dwarves, and then they ride off to his castle, I guess, leaving her kingdom without a monarch because the queen fucked around and found out. The original was not some timeless love story that got ruined by giving Snow White motivations outside of romance or making her love interest a knockoff Flynn Rider. What it was an exercise in the limits of animation. It was, of course, the first feature-length animated movie, and the creators clearly prioritized exploring what that meant. Here's what a musical number looks like fully animated. Here's what a transformation scene looks like. Here's what 30 full minutes of dwarf slapstick shenanigans looks like. And that is really cool. It gave us unquantifiable progress in the field of animation and is the reason that today we're all able to gather round and argue about how realistic is too realistic for Shrek to look. But the script was never meant to be beyond reproach. It was meant to be a structure for this artistic and technological advancement. Add to the fact that it's almost 90 years old and yeah, it's gonna require updates to be enjoyed for a new audience. There are better Disney remakes, but not remakes that deserved to be made more than this one. Aladdin 2019 was a good movie, but why did we need another good Aladdin movie so soon? What needed to be changed so bad? We just had to go back and make the genie a little bit sexier? Use your imagination, cowards! Criticism number 3, Rachel Ziggler is a bad actor and a bad person. I should not have to be here coming to the aid of a hot 23-year-old with a beautiful Broadway belt whose most recent job was kissing Kit Connor mid-chin-up 8 times a week. That can't be my responsibility. There's got to be more important ways to spend my time. But here I am, because y'all love to be haters. Rachel Ziggler has gotten in trouble a few times for being outspoken, specifically in relation to this film. One occurrence was when she finished a series of tweets thanking fans for their support of the Snow White trailer with a political statement. Now, I do not disagree with the statement or her right to share it. But I'm also not surprised that it made waves and that some people took umbrage with her tacking a political message onto a tweet about a Disney movie. But it seems like people got over that one pretty quickly. What really cracked people's magic mirror is that she stated she was never really a fan of Snow White growing up and spoke openly about some of the more outdated elements and how they would be updated for the movie. People acted like this girl had personally spit in their grandma's Starbies for being honest about not having some deep connection with a film that came out 3 generations before her, and for daring to say that her version would be different. First of all, as I've already stated, she is right to say that Snow White needed to be updated. And yes, I know that at this point we've had our fill of the "this princess doesn't need saving" and the "this isn't your grandma's fairy tale" and the "I'm your bad Cinderella." But like I said, this is an okay movie. It's not reinventing the wheel. So yeah, what other talking points do you want the lead actress to touch on? Not Palestine, apparently. And let's be so real. There is an inherent sexism in maintaining a hatred for a woman at this point for a couple years over a few comments where she didn't express quite enough gratitude or unquestioning respect for her project's origins. Where was this energy when Robert Pattinson made an entire brand over hating Twilight? People think she doesn't deserve a career for having a big mouth. Meanwhile, Hugh Grant has just stopped pretending he's not an asshole anymore. It's not even a secret he's trying to hide. And no one is boycotting his movies. What are we doing? And in terms of her being a bad actor, nuh-uh. I don't know what else to say. She's a good actor. The script may not have given her as much to work with as The Hunger Games or West Side Story, but I do think she actually delivers what nuance is possible within the story and genre. She embodies the timidness and defeat of her character at the start of the film without seeming like some cowering minx, and when her character grows in confidence, she doesn't oversell that either, and that's pretty much all we can ask of her. She's a Disney princess. What do you want? Finally, there are those that just don't think she's a good fit. And if you don't, you don't. But why are people pressed like celery juice about it? No, she's not as white as snow, but they give an explanation for why she's named Snow White in this movie. And you may think that's a cop-out, but if you really think not having some anemic-looking lass as Snow White is gonna ruin it for little girls, consider having other priorities. People have also been putting pictures of her with little to no makeup next to the most glammed up, sexy photos of Gal Gadot and saying, "This is the girl the queen's supposed to be insecure about." And if you think the point of the queen's story is not hubris and vanity and the folly that made her inadvertently craft her own demise, but about how Snow White actually was way hotter and thus deserved to win over her, go to jail. Plus, obviously it's 2025, so of course it's about how beautiful she is on the inside. Plus, in both the original and the remake, they talk about how the queen basically reverse yassifies Snow White by making her dress in rags and giving her a crappy little bob haircut. And as a rocker of the bob haircut, if I'm not mad, why you mad? But this brings me to my fourth criticism. Gal Gadot is a bad person and a bad actor. Gal Gadot has some affiliations and beliefs that cause people to not want to support her or her films. I don't really have an argument for that one. If that's the reason you don't want to watch the film, then that's fine, and I guess you could stop watching the video now. Actually, if you just want to keep it on in the background, that'd be great. In terms of her acting performance, I dub this criticism fair. The fairest of all, perhaps? Ugh. I think the problem with her performances across films in general is that she does not make strong choices. I don't know if anyone ever told her she was supposed to. She doesn't lean into the deliciously sinister demeanor of the evil queen, and there are some moments where it almost seems like she's going for a campier, exaggerated evil, but she doesn't commit to that either. I don't know if her performance was as comically bad as people are making it out to be, but she definitely should have chosen a clearer direction with her character. To borrow from fellow Disney baddie Maleficent, she needed to decide if she was going to be an Angelina Jolie or Kristen Chenoweth in Descendants. I really should have touched on Kristen Chenoweth as Maleficent in my good bad casting section of the Amelia Perez video. She's so unintimidating, and canonically, she's had sex with Cheyenne Jackson's Hades. No wonder their child is clearly a closeted lesbian. How could these two have a baby that wasn't gay? If I had to give a compliment to Gal Gadot's performance, it would be that I think she worked very hard on her big song. Not only did she stay on pitch, but she escaped a lot of the awkwardness that can come with non-singer actors doing musical numbers. And I feel like she spent a lot of time with a coach and made clear, if not particularly interesting, choices with them about like, oh, here's where you growl, here's where you kind of speak sing, and here's where you really belt. So it's not a master class in artistic expression, but it's also not a crash course in the Russell Crowe School of Song Interpretation. Speaking of which, criticism number 5. The score should have been more like the original. This one I also kind of agree with. The new songs that were written for the film, composed by writing team Pasek and Paul, are good, but they sure are Pasek and Paul songs. Snow White's new I Want song, Waiting on a Wish, could have been basically swapped out with Dear Evan Hansen's Waving Through a Window or The Greatest Showman's A Million Dreams, and you might not notice. Their music is also pretty interchangeable with most Lin-Manuel Miranda songs that don't contain rapping or Spanish. Well, Pasek and Paul songs are more like, whoa, and Lin-Manuel songs are kind of like, whoa. So a little different. Imagine if Snow White did rap in Spanish, though. Y'all would be so mad. I get why they didn't include Someday My Prince Will Come. As I keep stating, I am pro throwing out Snow White waiting around for some dude she's never spoken to. I'm sorry if that ruins your childhood somehow. But I do think that if they had kept the more classical sound for their new score, it would have been a great way to marry the Snow White of the original to this new version. We know Rachel Ziggler is capable of that style from West Side Story. She's amazingly versatile. Stay mad, haters. And keeping that distinct quality would set the score apart from the wash of contemporary pop musical theater sound you have in your Frozens and Encantos and Tangled. And the one thing I think we should keep from the Prince in the original is that he's a baritone. We do not need another leading man tenor role. I can just feel Ben Platt sniffing at these songs. That being said, I usually think that putting new songs into existing musicals adds nothing to the films but their ability to be nominated for more awards. Actually, my pet peeve with Disney remakes, such as Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid are that new songs were carefully crafted for the Broadway version, but they insist on not including those in the film in favor of other worse new songs. In Snow White, there was so little in the original in terms of character development, motivation, relationships, that these songs do have the chance to do what musical numbers are supposed to do and actually expand the story. And they are pretty catchy, despite sounding like a million songs you've heard before. Fun fact, one of the songs is called Princess Problems, and that's also what I call the fact that I can't drive. Finally, let's talk about the dwarves. You guys 100% win with this one. The dwarves are terrible. They look terrible. The decision to use CGI instead of casting little people or even just any person is terrible. It's all terrible, and the worst part is, this is one area where the original did give us room to work. See, I was surprised to find on my rewatching that although the word dwarves is in the title, they are never explicitly referred to as dwarves in the film or stated to be any kind of mythical creature. They are exclusively referred to as little men. So the remake could have made them regular little people while not having to change much at all, and also not have to worry about the optics of using little people exclusively to play magical forest creatures. Little people deserve to play regular guys, and quite frankly, we all want our turn to play magical forest creatures. I would love to just swap the auditions I get with the ones that Warwick Davis gets for a while. I think we would both kill it. But the film goes in the opposite direction, and while they still don't use the word dwarf, they do casually mention that these guys are like 200 years old and they have magical glowy hands that make the rocks into diamonds or something. It's very poorly explained and never touched on after that. Like Snow White never asks them if they have any powers that might help her defeat the evil queen. If Spider-Man were there, he would have gotten their asses into gear. Also, side note, in all the promotional material, they refer to the dwarves as the miners, and I kept waiting for that to come up at all in the movie. Like, for example, in the original, there's that scene where Snow White is casually breaking and entering into their cottage, and she thinks that they're all going to be children because all their stuff is small. And I thought it'd be funny if someone told her, like, oh, a bunch of miners live there. And she's like, a whole house of miners are just living alone? What the fuck? Like, she thinks it's a Team 10 hype house type deal. Maybe that's where they could have worked in that she herself is over 18, and thus it's cool that an adult man is macking on her. Disney clearly knew ahead of time that they were doing little people dirty too, because they do work in several actors who are little. One of Not Flynn Rider's bandit friends is played by a little person, and he's got a decent part. He gets a girlfriend and a crossbow, so, you know, living the dream. And several background actors in The Village are also little people, but this is so obviously a consolation prize for not doing what they knew they should have done from the beginning, which is call up Peter Dinklage, not cast him because he's way too famous for this shit, but actually ask him or literally any other little person how to do this thing respectfully. Like when I see fan casts for live action Hercules and they've got Lizzo or Beyonce playing one of the muses, Beyonce is not going to be one of the muses. She hasn't been one of anything since 2006. The dwarves are really representative of what's wrong with this movie, which is bad, unfocused branding. They made a movie that was not overtly pandering to the nostalgia of the original and made decisions they knew more conservative audiences wouldn't be happy with, which is fine. But then they make these monstrosities because they care more about keeping the original character designs than doing right by progressive audiences who may have otherwise appreciated what they were trying to do with this movie. And it's a shame because, as I've stated, I think this is an absolutely okay movie that I would recommend to anyone who has run out of age-appropriate Spider-Man content for their children. Oh, and since I know you're all wondering, I'll answer the big question. What do I think about Dopey's big Silent Bob moment? I'm pro. The original actually states that the only reason Dopey doesn't speak is because he's never tried to, so it's canon that there's no reason he couldn't speak if he had something important enough to say. In fact, it almost feels like in the original, Dopey is a Chekhov's gun that never gets shot. And Dopey should get shot. Now let me ask you guys a question. Do you think Snow White and Dopey had a little bit of chemistry in this one? It just seems like his crush is a little more reciprocated in this version. Why else would they give him hair instead of keeping his little egghead? It's to show he's not graying like the others and probably a sprightly 100 years old instead of 250, so basically age appropriate for Snow White. I bet you in 10 or 15 years, there are going to be people that said that Dopey was their first crush, the adult Simba of Gen Alpha. To conclude, this is the kind of movie I shouldn't have ever had to think about again the second the credits rolled. But this is a thing in my life when people start dogpiling hate onto something that doesn't necessarily deserve it and not giving it a fair chance. I feel like I gotta step in and take an even more positive stance than I normally would. It's the reason I was always out there defending Kristen Stewart even before she became the unbothered queer icon that she is now, and also probably why I vote NDP. Just kidding. I do that because I think Jagmeet Singh is sexy. Hey, just like Rachel Ziggler, I should end this video with an unsolicited political message and remind any Canadians out there to go and vote. And please give this video a like and subscribe. But vote. That's what's most important. But also give a little like and subscribe. And as always, have a delicious day.